Today we're going to be showing you how to dial down a better bass bite in those murky water conditions with these baits right here. So I feel like in bass fishing there's two types of people. There's people who love murky water, and then there's people who hate fishing murky water. Me personally, I love fishing that chocolate milk stuff. I don't know why, I love the surprise factor when it comes to dialing down a bass bite. And personally, I feel a lot more confident in certain scenarios when it comes to fishing murky water. But hey, I'm not everybody out there, so I have some baits right here that are gonna make this easy for you. They're gonna help you dial down a better bite. And overall, it's gonna help you wrap your head around murky water fishing a little bit more. So oftentimes we end up with murky water after big rainstorms or just storms in general. If you guys can relate to like me, a lot of my home lakes, we have a lot of pleasure boaters, and a lot of my lakes are surrounded by clay edges. So when you get these pleasure boaters that tube all day and stuff like that, they cause the wake of the wave to go up into the wall like this, and they come back and forth and back and forth, and over time what that does is that muds up the water. So all your favorite, bays or coves or shallow water areas are just completely blown out. Sometimes the entire lake just gets washed out and you're forced to deal with muddy water conditions. So let's talk about a situation that you guys get a big rainstorm. What happens with rainstorms is that water level rises, you get a lot of flooded grass, you find flooded areas that you don't typically get to fish because there's not always water there. What's good about this is bass love to get curious and they move their way up into those shallow pockets and those flooded waters because they like to look for food there. So one thing that I like to do is start by using a square bill in those scenarios. A bright orange square bill in like a craw color is a great way to get on a bite. You can fish shallow with one of these. You can fish in spots that you don't normally fish. And one thing about this bait that is really great is they're not only bright, but they are loud. So if you guys can hear, this thing is full of rattles. So that is really gonna be a good indicator for that fish to sense this bait. They're gonna be able to see it once it gets close enough because it's bright, but mainly they're gonna be hearing it just go down in those rocks and make its way through that muddy area. So this is a great bait to try and get on a bite. If this doesn't work, we're gonna go to these ones. In the exact same scenario, you guys will be just fine using anything that has some kind of flash or vibration to it. So let's pretend that we have a flooded shoreline or some flooded grass. A great way to try and search that area would be by using a vibrating jig. Vibrating jig is very similar to the crankbait scenario. You're gonna dig around, you're gonna let that fish know that that bait is there. You got a big vibration, it causes a little bit of a wake underneath the surface. And I like to tip it with a paddle tail swim bait. That's gonna bulk up the presentation, add a little more action. It's gonna let the fish know that you're there. Black and blue or white and chartreuse is my go-to. Those are the colors that I like to fish. If you can go all chartreuse, that's fine too. So vibrating jig is really good. Now let's talk spinnerbaits. I have two spinnerbaits right here. Both of them can be used in this scenario. It just depends on the time of the year and what the situation is. In the summertime, when that water temperature is warmer, you're getting a lot more rain. One bait that I like to throw that's really flashy, lets the fish know that you're there, is a willow blade spinnerbait. As you guys can see right here, we have a copper blade, we have a silver blade here, and we have a chartreuse skirt, as well as I tipped it with a paddle tail swim bait. So this is another bait that's gonna just mimic those bait fish. It's really gonna flash. A lot of people overlook the spinnerbait, and I'm telling you guys, this is one of my favorite baits to throw, and it produces so many fish. I promise it will not let you down. Let's pretend we're in a scenario where it's spring or fall. The water temperatures are colder, maybe the weather's a little bit more bipolar. That's when I'm picking up something dark and bulky like this. This is another spinnerbait, but this has a Colorado blade on it. Now the difference between these two blades, if you guys can see right here, is one is very nimble and sharp and the other one is big and bulky. What this spinnerbait is going to do is it's gonna provide a big thump, but it's also going to allow you to fish slower. Now this is gonna be good in the spring and the fall where the water temperatures are cooling down or warming up or they're fluctuating a lot. This is gonna slow things down a bit, but it's also gonna fire those fish up to really cream a spinnerbait. The black and blue is going to help that bait stand out more in the dark water. And again, the Colorado blade provides a big thump, big vibration. It's a good way to let those fish know that you're there. One thing that all these baits that I just mentioned have in common that I didn't bring up in the beginning is they are all moving baits. So they're going to allow you to cover a lot of water, make multiple casts, and it's going to be a good way to just cover water and find more fish. But when all those are not working and you can't seem to figure them out with that, that's when I pick up this guy right here. This is the good old trusty black and blue bass jig. A bass jig is a great way to just get down, get tight to the bottom, and try and get a bait in where those fish are ambushing those baits more than they're searching for them. Oftentimes bass will hold tight to cover or tight to structure, and if you throw a jig in around those rocks, for example, we have a bass jig, so I have this tipped with a craw on here. This is going to imitate crayfish being in the water. Crayfish like to move around in the rocks and stuff like that. So when it is really murky and bass can't necessarily see anything, they're still going to sense stuff and they're still going to be looking avidly for something to eat. But what they might do is they might hold tight to those rocks and wait to ambush something like a crawfish. So if this bass is sitting down in those rocks and you bring this crawfish through those rocks and you put it in front of its face, it's going to sense that bait's there and they're going to suck it right up. And it's a lot of fun to get on a good bass bite in those murky water conditions with a black and blue bass jig. One more thing that I'll mention aside from the bass jig is sometimes you can just get nimble. You can eliminate the bass jig and just throw a black and blue craw on a Texas rig and it's going to work just as good. I prefer black and blue. Black and blue is my all-time favorite color when it comes to murky water, but a lot of people like to fish like purples, black and red, things like that. Those are fine too. Anything very dark should stand out in those murky water conditions. So overall, if you guys take one of these baits right here, take them with you to the pond or the lake, or as a matter of fact, bring all of them, you should be able to filter through them and be able to get on some kind of bite. Murky water can be intimidating, but I promise you it's not as hard as you think. Try to get shallow, try to get tight to cover, and fish baits that stand out. I hope this helps you guys out when it comes to fishing murky water. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Tight Lines. Hey, if you're looking for more information about fishing, hit the link in the description below or hit the subscribe button and you guys can check out more of our content on our channel. Other than that, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys next time.